Ladies and gentlemen, President John Sexton.
Thank you very much, Richard. Thank you, Yeshiva. It's very daunting to be the fourth wheel with three such extraordinary recipients of honorary degrees: a holy man and great humanitarian, an extraordinary leader of global civil society and philanthropist, and a woman who embodies all of the characteristics of a saintly life to which we all aspire. What I've done, if anything worthwhile, pales in significance, but it's a great honor to be included with them. This ceremony, the way we dress, the way you dress, the bestowing of degrees, the singing of songs, we humans do this to separate the sacred from the ordinary. We mark this as special, and I hope that the graduates and the families of the graduates will do this day, this entire day, and certainly this ceremony in slow motion. This is about creating for you memories by marking this as special. It's a very liturgical thing. And of course, my talk has to be in that spirit. You'll find that it is a homage to YU, to the wonderful commitment that YU has to mind grounded in spirit, to a deep grounding in those wonderful values of the tradition of Judaism. It's a strange thing, I guess, for the president of NYU, a secular university, to be giving such an address, even more that I'm a Catholic. My wife's brother once said to me, "You reek of goyosity." If there is an apologia, and I deliberately use a Latin and not a Hebrew word there, I want you to know, maybe this will help you memorize it, you are looking at a historical figure in Judaism. I am a university president that does teach a course called Baseball as a Road to God. My academic gown has on it a little circle with the number 42 for my favorite ball player of all times, Jackie Robinson of the Brooklyn Dodgers. And indeed, the historical figure at which you're looking is the Jackie Robinson of the B'nai B'rith Little League. I was the first goy I broke the religion line out in Rockaway. I also, and this will mean more to some of the parents than it does to any of the graduates of this wonderful class. I also was the Shabbos goy for the Twin Cantors of Brooklyn. I knew YU and its greatness long before I knew NYU, actually. I knew of the great Richard Joel through the eyes of my wife. She adored him. And of course, I'm happy to be here as part of the connector between YU and NYU, which is so real. It's real in Richard's 2 degrees, and Lenny Wolf's degrees, and Michael Jessel's children. It's real in many, many ways. And it's real for me in a very personal way because of the presence in my hooding of 2 of my former students, Yeshiva, who is the chairman of the board of Stern, who was my law student over 20 years ago, and most of all, a board member from the Cardozo Law School, Rosemary, who was my student when she was in high school 50 years ago this year. So it comes together for me, and I want to speak about my admiration for YU, and I want to tell you, don't take for granted the value proposition of the education you have received here. Richard talks constantly to us in the higher education community about YU, and he talks to you about what he hopes for you to be. And he uses the words ennobling and enabling. He wants for you greatness of the mind, but grounded in the spiritual plane. Now, I want to talk to you about precisely that, and I'm going to do it through a parable, which I'll tell you, and then I'll close with a lesson or two drawn from that parable very quickly. The parable requires me to ask the graduates and even the families to transport yourself mentally to a time known to some of the families 50 years ago, but to a world you were unlikely to know 50 years ago, and that was the world of Brooklyn Irish Catholicism, the world in which I lived in the 1950s and the 1960s. In a way, the story I'm going to tell you should be a terrifying, I mean it to be a terrifying story. There I was in Brooklyn, being taught by great and enlightened and progressive teachers at a Jesuit high school in Crown Heights. And a great and enlightened and progressive man, a Jesuit priest, wrote on the blackboard one day the words, "Extra ecclesia nulla salus." Outside the church, there's no salvation. And I went up to him after class and I said, "Father, does that mean that my best friend, Jerry Epstein, will not go to heaven?" And he said, "He will not go to heaven unless you convert him to Catholicism." There was a feeling in that room among us as young Catholic men that we were being taught the truth, capital T, capital T. The only truth there was, a non-negotiable truth, a truth that created a we and the they, and that salvation turned on that. Now for me, the world changed when in the years after 1963 I was getting my doctorate in religion at Fordham. As a great man, Pope John the 23rd was leading the Catholic Church through what we called the Second Vatican Council. And essentially, John the 23rd taught us and introduced us to a word, ecumenism. He taught us to have an ecumenical attitude. He said to us, life is so much richer, and our understanding of the really important things in life and the spiritual dimension will be richer if we will view the world not simply through the window we've been given, but through the many facets of a diamond. And this began what for me was an unfolding attitude that has unfolded over the last decades, perhaps the greatest model of which was a man I met in 1963 who became my mentor for my doctoral dissertation, who at that time was probably the leading expert in the world on a single theologian of the Catholic Church, a medieval theologian, St. Anselm. 1963, one medieval theologian. 1983, I went to the United Nations to celebrate the publication of his 60-volume work on world spirituality, which had in it 25 faith traditions. He never compromised his own view of the world, but he had enriched it over those decades through this spirit of ecumenism. Let me draw some lessons from that parable, if you'd let me. You are passing today, we sacramentalize today your movement over a critical threshold. Life on the other side of graduation is going to be fundamentally different from life as it's been up to now. The world into which you will enter is going to be intense, unrelenting. It's going to be complex and cacophonous. The grounding that you have received here at YU will be very, very important as you seek a spot on which to stand, even as that world whirls around you. But understand this about that world. It has two features which will challenge you. First, we are witnessing, especially in this country, but around the world as well, what I call a rise of dogmatism. And I am not talking about the dogmatism that's obvious, that's associated easily with religious fundamentalism. I'm talking about dogmatism as a style of thought. Americans, and increasingly others, have developed a deep allergy to nuance. We like very simple answers. We want everything to be reduced to a top 10 list and a ranking. We do our discourse in slogans. We get our information in feedback loops, now only going to those sources that will reinforce our already obtained viewpoint. We have, in our own way, across a whole range of things, not just religious, but political and in every area of thought, we have a capacity to think that we have got the truth. Capital T, capital T. This is the real Tea Party. The triumphalists who think they have the truth. If you want a book to read over the summer, there's a little book by the name of The Rhetoric of Reaction, written in 1991, 20 years ago, by a great Princeton economist named Albert Hirschman. And in the opening pages of that, he talks about, and remember, he's writing in 1991. This really didn't begin to become apparent until about a decade later. It's very apparent today. But he writes about how in a two-party political system, the rhetoric begins to divide itself such that you get to a point, and aren't we at that point now, where each side in a conversation looks at the other and says, how did they ever get that way? Each side has the truth. This dogmatism is the antithesis of what you've been taught here at YU, where you've been taught to embrace the pursuit of nuance, to try to untangle the complexity. But the second feature of the world in which you will live is that this increase in dogmatism is occurring even as the world is miniaturized. We have discovered in the last few years that there's no way of gating out other economies, but there's also no way of gating out other peoples or cultures, and certainly not thought. Some will respond to this by nativism, by trying to build the gates higher. They will not succeed. The world is going to create a situation where people of great difference from you are going to be in your life, even as this dogmatism is growing. Now, when you put these things together, you get what I think is the great question for you, the graduating class of 2011, as you move out into the world. Are you going to use your YU education to ennoble and enable the progress of humankind in the world? Are you going to see this miniaturization of the world as something that's terrifying? Or are you going to see it as a great chance, an opportunity, an ecumenical moment where we can build bridges and tunnels of understanding and create a community of communities where we don't collapse into relativism because we each have our grounding in each of our values, traditions upon which to believe? It strikes me that the message of a YU education is that the latter is the better course. As I close, I understand it's the custom in closing to do a Dvar Torah. So the goy shall attempt. The Parsha this week is the Bar Midbar. For those that aren't as familiar as I, that's Numbers chapters 1 to 5. And the Jews in Sinai are told in the Parsha that the time has come to be counted again. And the classic commentary is, why? Why should we be counted again? We've been counted. Why go through this? Is this, we would say today in the United States, another example of overregulation and government intrusion? And the answer that's given is that the census is necessary. It reflects change. New children have been born. Children have passed into adulthood. It strikes me that that's what's happening here today. That you pass into this new world over this critical threshold. As you do it, never take for granted that your mind has been trained, even as it's learned, to root everything you do in the great values of your tradition. God bless you and good luck.